Or they're asked, not just what they think about their water and wastewater facilities and infrastructure system, but what do they think about improving it? What are some of the concerns that they have?
Most communities in Canada tend not to ask these questions. Perhaps this is because they don't need to. Perhaps because they feel it's not their job to worry about these issues. But what if wastewater and water infrastructure breaks? What if it doesn't fit in? What happens then? What about those communities? And how might these communities more creatively collaborate to solve these problems? To confront some of these questions, a diverse group of Anishinaabe, Cree, and Metis met with researchers at the University of Guelph in June 2012. Together we wanted to envision a new way of working with participant First Nation communities to confront the issues of water and wastewater within their communities.
It's so many miles and so long since I've met you. Don't even know.
In a retreat-style workshop, the following gathered for 2 days in an old country home on the outskirts of the city of Guelph.
I'm Kim from Wastewater University. I'm facilitating this.
I'm Kim, you can remember, but I'm from First Nations University of Canada.
Nope, I'm Bill Marion. I'm Manager of Public Works on James Beth, Cree Nation and Saskatchewan.
I'm Jason, who's been chatting.
I'm Robert Dawson from Shoal Lake 39 in Ontario.
I'm Joanne from Laurier.
I'm Phil from the Aboriginal Water Wastewater Association of Ontario.
My name is Jamie. I'm from the University of Guelph.
I'm Ben. I'm the proud owner of this squeaky chair from Davidson University.
Good morning. I'm Eliza from Indigenous Studies Department at Trent University.
I'm Jordan. I'm from the University of Guelph.
I'm Shirley Williams, and I'm from Wukumakong, and the elder for this group here. I'm from Trent University.
As we gathered in the morning, it was pretty clear that this was a different kind of water workshop, and that there was a deeper sense of our relationship with water. For example, our round of introductions extended far beyond what we did as a profession, and were coupled with a translucent honesty that was showcased in our willingness to share in our spiritual connection to water, or our relationship with water, or our relationship with First Nations issues. This allowed us to feel more comfortable, and even vulnerable with each other, and thus created a much more productive and honest dialogue. The workshop was rooted in a deeper understanding of the spiritual relationship between the Anishinaabe and water, and as we did both days, we began with a ceremonial smudging. This was led by our elder Shirley. She explains that it's an act of purification. Water is a woman's teaching, and that's why Shirley leads us. And we smudge with sage, because this is the woman's medicine. Seamlessly, her prayer of thanksgiving transitioned into the traditional teachings of water in the Anishinaabe community. And fittingly, we take a drink of water together, before she explores the deeper teachings of Anishinaabe water.
The rivers and the lakes are the bloodlines of the Mother Earth. And so we give thanksgiving for the water that she provides, that she flows, that we...
Afterwards, our initial small group discussions seemed to float around the ideas of disconnection, which Brock signifies in his story.
This is probably the most ironic situation that I can come up with. I could come up with, period, if I wanted to come up with an ironic situation about First Nations and water. This is my parents, Tom and Carol. They live on the reserve, Shoal Lake 40. It's 2 hours from Winnipeg by car. And this, like Shirley said, is the body of water there. A long time ago, the city of Winnipeg looked for a source of drinking water, early 1900s, and they were going to build an aqueduct. And they looked all over northwestern Ontario, and they found Shoal Lake to be the cleanest and clearest around and easiest to treat. And so it's very clear water there. You can see to the bottom for a long ways. So they decided, okay, we're gonna put in an aqueduct, 150-kilometer aqueduct, and it's huge. You can drive a boat in there, right? And it goes all the way from Shoal Lake to Winnipeg, and all the Lake of the Woods water drains this way, so it's a perfect setup. So my parents live on the reserve. Shoal Lake in 2006 was identified on the national scale as one of the top 8, probably the top 2 or 3, a priority for water treatment plants. They don't have a water treatment plant. People have local pumps that pull water in from the lake, but there's no treatment system. So it's all about boil water advisories. No one's ever really, well, some people drink from the lake, but it's very risky. So what has to happen here is 2012 now. They still don't have a water treatment plant, and what happens is the water goes down the aqueduct to about 800,000, 900,000 people in Winnipeg, and all those people get water from Shoal Lake. There's treatment as soon as it hits the edge of Winnipeg, and then it's distributed throughout. And then they bottle some of that water, and then they put it on a truck, and they haul it back out to Shoal Lake, about 200 kilometers when you go by road. And then they put it on a little boat, and then they bring 2 bottles of water back to the end of my parents' dock. So it's funny because the water's right there, and it's got to go, 150 kilometers that way, 200 kilometers back in bottles just to drink.
Eliza True.
It's always starting at the wrong place. Where we really need to start is with community. We need to understand the community. We need to understand the homelands that they are on. They are the ones that know it the best. This is what we would envision. This is what complements our landscape. This is what fits for us.
Bill Marion.
When you design the water system on the First Nation, it's that First Nation people who are going to have to survive on that water. And so when it comes to safety, they're the key stakeholders. They're the primary stakeholders. They're the ones that should have the ultimate say.
It became clear in the discussions that there was a discrepancy about who did have the ultimate say, and Bill explains in an example.
Our residential subdivision, which included the development of the water treatment plant, the water distribution, water storage water, and the sewage pumping station, it was installed in 1985. Before that, there was no system. There was no residential subdivision or pipe system on the reserve. And that's pretty common back in Saskatchewan at that time. There wasn't very many reserves that had systems in the first place. So going back to the mid-80s, 85, 20, 25, almost 30 years ago, there was no infrastructure on First Nations. We feel that when there are certain standards imposed on us, we feel kind of resentment. And they say, oh, we should have had input, but really there was no real formal process to gain that input.
Hasro Farabash.
Maybe it goes back all the way to the imposition of our ideas of safe water on a community that has perhaps a different spiritual perspective about what is good water. Who has said to us that if the water has low turbidity, right pH, this is good for drinking? How do we know that? Where did it come from? We are learning now that in fact that very same water we consider safe for drinking, that even people drink in the city. Yes, we don't get maybe immediately, we don't get diarrhea from it, but is it really a healthy water? And it's a very limited perception of what is good water. Now we heard yesterday that from the First Nations spiritual perspective, there are 4 different types of water.
People where First Nations settled They always followed buffalo, they followed the rivers, they went to lakes, they're always near those kinds of sources. So you can always find reserves on the edge of water, almost always.
So if the First Nations have had a relationship with water that extends for thousands of years, what's happening in the current context? Jordan, our youngest participant, explains.
There's not a lot of traditional teaching. Like, I see you've retained a lot, and you know you're able to pass on your knowledge, but you know I can't communicate with my grandmother, my gokom, because she doesn't speak English, and you know, like she says hello or she says this and this, but like I won't be able to access whatever she knows, and you know, my mom, she can only access so much, and it really creates a big divide between our generations, I should say, and you know, there's also, you know, my aunt and an uncle that both went to residential school, and you know, when you go through an experience like that, you close off. You can't, and you know, you can't. It's hard to open up to other people. And
she runs through the valley of death.
I interpret from our first day that there's a real desire to do things differently. That collaboration is excitingly vital.
I feel that the sense that there's something important here that we're all being a part of that's going to assist in facilitating some change, and that's a powerful feeling.
But in our later discussions, we meet the more daunting challenges of what that means. How do we make this happen? And how can we create more inclusive environments to engage in issues around water in First Nations communities? We want to find a way to make water more than about designs and services. Facilitator Kim Anderson.
How do you crack that open so that people don't think, oh, this is just about pipes and sewage, therefore we're going to leave it with the operator and chief of council, and that's, you know, we have so much of that in our communities. I think it's like, oh yeah, well, that's their responsibility. You know, I'm not accountable. I don't have a part in that, as opposed to, no, it's not just about pipes and sewers. Actually, it's about how we think about water. It's about who we are as people.
And so the goal in all this is to ask members of the community themselves to help guide this research and the research of others around the question, how do we engage as outsiders? It becomes clear that whatever the method is, it must first be rooted in a genuine and real sense of respect.
This first part of it is so key and important. Your first, what do you call it? Your first perception of somebody.
First contact.
First contact. How do you do it? Star Trek. It has to be done right, and in each community, there's only one way to do it. Even my company and us as a whole, like when you walk up to someone, and let's just say we're two white people in downtown Toronto, and we have to meet up with each other, we get each other's names, and we go and meet at Tim Hortons. I'd say you start at zero. You don't know anything about him, he doesn't know anything about you. And you build your relationship to trust at some point. When you're Anishinaabe or different color skin or even different from a community, or you're going into a community that's traditional, you start here. You don't even start at zero. You've got to somehow get to zero before they'll start listening to you to build you up to this point.
And you want to start off, like you said, the right way, because if you don't, not only will a community shut you down, but word gets around.
Yes.
And it gets around a lot quicker than you think it does.
Robert Dawson.
I think you have to remember too that the people on reserves have been so swamped with all this surveys and people coming in, and they don't see any result from all this.
Yeah.
You know, they're giving information out, but they're not getting anything back to them. They don't see that.
Yeah.
Well, then that makes them closed off, because they figure, well, I give all this information, but I'm not seeing any improvement in my life as a person living here. So what's the purpose of this? You know, why am I doing this if this is what I'm not getting? Like, I'm not getting that.
And I think that's a really important point, because the premise of
participatory action research or community-based research is that that researcher doesn't go in with a team and then fly back out like helicopters. It's all about the community has ownership of that data.
Right.
The community has the ability to, when the final reports are being created and they get to see them and say, no, that's not the way we see it, this is the way we see it, they get to adapt and change it. We try to make sure that we arm that community with as much knowledge from that academic standpoint so they can facilitate change.
In a particularly honest conversation, the room starts to grow with ideas.
But if it's truly community driven, then they can tell you what's going to work and what isn't, but you also need them to walk with you on that.
That when you're collaborating with community, because it isn't about the words of helping and supporting, it's collaboration. It needs to be a collaborative, collective effort to be there for community in their decision making, in the sense of their driving this. What kind of skills and knowledge do the people that are collaborating with them bring to the table? And then it's that exchange of skills and knowledges to start to understand what they know and what is traditionally their homelands. What do they know about it? They know about the water, they know about the landscape, they know about the medicines, they know what's been affected, they know what hasn't been affected yet. That community knows, and that's where it needs to come in, so that when you're collaborating with community, that the first thing that you're doing is that you're understanding the protocols, you're understanding language in the sense of how they communicate that, right? And you're understanding, you're learning, they're educating whoever is coming there or collaborating with, they're educating those people, not the other way around.
The first thing is getting in contact with the First Nations, but you have to be careful who you're talking to. Who is the leader? What treaty area do they belong? That's very important to them. Yeah. So there's Lake Superior, there's Treaty 3, there's Treaty 9. Find out where are you, who you're going to work with.
One of the project leads, Jason McCullough.
When I hear community engagement, I think, every public as a membership at large. But there are, of course, individuals in these communities that are specifically dedicated their careers and interests.
You're definitely going to get into the chief and councils onto their table and the approvals you want probably a lot quicker doing it that way, because someone like Bill, if you could convince Bill or Robert to go back and they really believe in what you're saying and what you're doing, and because they have a background on it, it's not so hard to convince them. Find someone like these guys here, because those are the ones that will have regular meetings and access to the chief and council, and they will get the message there directly, and they can convince them because they're already trusted members in that position. They're already there for, they've been there for however long. And
more specifically, Shirley explains.
That's the first contact, and I guess the first one is call, and the second thing is you appear yourself and to go there yourself to find out. A call could be regarding about what is your protocol, for us to come in for research. Find out what the other universities about protocols of research. Now we have one at Trent University, and to look at those guidelines and that, that tells you how to prepare yourself to go in. And the other thing that you need to remember, most of them will say you don't forget your tag. Well, not all First Nations are culturally friendly with tobacco.
you got to do your research before you talk to them, and you figure out what are they, who are they, are they Ojibwe?
Because that changes geographically.
Yeah. I think you have a better chance if you're on the Indigenous department to help you.
Yeah, sorry.
If you're non-native people, make sure you have an elder with you or some Anishinaabe person.
Phil addresses the question of whether we meet with people in the water sector or start with a ground-up approach.
It depends on if we have established relationships or not with the community. So you gotta look at the communities that you want to target. Do we have a relationship there? Yes or no? If we don't, then your course of action might be the way to go. If we do have a relationship, then that would dictate another course of action.
I think some of the important things to remember is the protocol, but also trying to engage the community in that work. So you're going to chief and council and the water operators and those individuals, but also to engage the community when you're starting to do work like this, post whatever in the band office or wherever it is, and have an informal meeting, have food there, you know, get down with the people and, you know, work out what kinds of things, because some of those things may be missed, the people that are living in the community that's not getting to chief and council level, but also engagement like that has to be inclusive of everyone.
I've had experience within 39 for years watching people come in and do presentations. The turnout is very slight, you know, like people don't come out normally for almost nothing.
Yeah.
They have to offer prizes to people to get them to come out to meetings, you know. So I don't think that's the way to go in most communities that I've experienced. I would say that you have to go house to house and engage them that way in their own home, where they're more comfortable. Instead of putting them on the spot in front of a bunch of people, they're not comfortable with that. And I've watched that. And all kinds of people try different methods, but the method that I've seen that works the best is the one where you go house to house and you talk to people directly in their own home.
I mean, you don't want the operators just to speak as operators.
Yeah.
You want them to speak as
This is
Community
your
members.
territory. Yeah, community members, and you're from, you know,
As
this
human
is your
beings.
territory, this is your people, this is your
Anishinaabe.
culture.
I mean, in a sense, really.
One of the things that Jason was saying was, well, he's a bit worried that we might say, okay, here's what we could do. Well, what do you want as a community? Like, I don't know. It's your project. What are you going to do? You know, be like, at least if we have some things, we say, well, we could do this or we could do that, but it's totally up to you. We could document a story. We could do it in film.
I wonder if every community has their story of water story, and maybe as part of this process, and in fact, you know, if this project is about developing appropriate means of water management in the long run, the first and foremost thing that we need to understand is the story of the community, and perhaps their story around water.
But you have a room full of people with expertise and gifts and knowledge. So I think that you could offer something from everybody's expertise in some form of document to do with water that benefits them. That's, I mean, what do we have to offer? I mean, you can go out and anyone could shop and give them a gift at the end of the year, but that's not going to do anything. It's got to be something that they can't access right now, or something that if they wanted to get it done would cost them. You know, that's one thing that sold in the Roosevelt community there, was that they're getting this access to this big study by the University of Manitoba that was going to, in the end, they're working with the Holmes group and it's going to create this Anishinaabe code, and they were going to get these, what they got out of it and they were excited about is that they were going to get these engineered assessments, detailed assessments of their homes. And the end product of that was very exciting to the whole nation, just to be able to put the real story onto paper of their house, of their problem. Could offer like 5 water workshops or something. I don't know what kind of travel budgets you have for trips to the community or to bring someone out of the community to learn, but that, you know, like I would put in my own time, and you guys are putting in your time, if it were like one of the workshops was a 1-day or a half-day workshop for anyone for the community to attend, or for one individual person or a couple students or something on this, you know, the science of treatment of water. You know, maybe like a few of us could be there for that workshop, and you could just put out there that it's the very scientific presentation. And then there's another workshop that Shirley would come out and do her water presentation. You know, like you line those up and you say, you have access to 5 workshops, and if you have to put a dollar figure behind it, this would cost an industry, whatever, $100,000 worth of convincing them that by accessing these experts or this many courses or whatever, in the end you could certify someone in the community for something. And that then gives them that education and that certification and internal power of knowledge that Shirley was talking about, some kind of expert created within the community to deal with their own water.
And one of the things that I've seen in the contaminants work that I do with the community-based research projects that occur, those are the most successful ones, is when they integrate with the youth and the elders and the researchers. And oftentimes the researchers will then have a shadow person, whoever that may be, and maybe this person isn't even wanting or intending to go to post-secondary education. They haven't even finished, high school, but they have that life experience and are able to facilitate shadowing this person that has this knowledge and then continuing to build that knowledge within the communities. And that's the strength of facilitating that as capacity building, because the projects that are funded through my program, they grow if they're done that way. The youth from that within, and I'm talking youth from grade 5 to grade 8, and then they carry that through. So some of these youth are actually thinking about post-secondary education in that area of water.
Yeah, because that's probably the thing that we want for them the most, is the empowerment to make these choices and decisions on their own as a community.
But more importantly is you're giving the community a chance to self-actualize, which they do not currently have. And it's giving you the opportunity for the first time to actually be involved in the process and show people you are capable of being involved in the process and capable of growing and leading growth. And I think that'd be really like a milestone for them, is just, if there is growth that happens, like you show this to the government, and that is just your first step in saying, like, yes, you need to speak to us and you need our opinions and you need this if you're going to make policies regarding us, because we know us better than you know us.
There is very little resource. There are very little resources available for people who have great ideas but are not directly connected to university or not directly connected to big business.
Think about like Bill. I could just see him sitting in the treatment plant there. It's so quiet except for all that stuff that's happening, and not a lot of people coming to visit you. But your job, you got to be there, and reading about S8 and thinking and deep thinking and creating those spreadsheets and stuff. Good ideas right there. And the number one expert for his community on water by far is Bill. It's not me, and it's not you, and it's not anybody else. It's the guy's been there for 10, 15 years. He knows his community. He knows his water supply source. He knows the best options for treatment, and he knows what would make it 10 times better. And if he's telling us something, we better listen.
I think respecting each community's uniqueness, but also the fact too that once they realize the questions that they're being asked, the responses that they're going to give are going to reflect their values, their traditions, and their customs. They'll realize that the response, they have no opportunity to give a response here, but a response that's going to reflect the entire community's major desire, like, what do they really feel? And I think that it'll open up a different way of thinking from the community. And again, I commend this initiative for exploring that potential to either revive or reawaken or allow communities to respond in a way that's going to have them consider what this really means. And like I said, it's something I think that it's a long time coming.